Come on, Rue. She's not really a witch. The grown-ups just say that so you won't go near her. I hesitated, looking at the house looming before me. The only lights inside it's coming from more of those horrible lanterns. I know that, Toby. Don't be stupid. So what are you afraid of? She has the skulls in her trees, Toby. Toby snorted, his diversion visible, even though through the cheap ghost costume. It's Halloween, Ruby. Miss Whittle had her skulls in her tree, and you weren't even scared of her. Yeah, but... I trailed off, watching Ellie go marching up to the sidewalk with the plastic eyes of her frog-headed rattling as she walked. This is different. Of course I knew Toby wouldn't be standing in front of Miss Old McKay's house any more than I did. We had come to an agreement before we went out tonight that if anyone would give out bad candy, it would be her. Best to avoid her entirely. And besides, it wasn't bad enough that any of us had the first idea of where she lived. What we didn't reckon was on how big Billy Kent had thought of along more or less some of the lines, and had we have known, Billy Kent was in the 6th grade, and was a bit embarrassed by the fact that he had once called the 3rd graders in his school in elementary school. Now he and a gang of 6 other graders were trying to work their way into the other friend groups by making a show of their dislike for the younger kids. They usually limited themselves to the occasional stolen lunch or nasty prank, but they had recognized Halloween as a night when children are chasing each other in scary costumes and screaming was considered harmless, and they haven't even hesitated to take on that opportunity. And so we ended up here. Mostly lost, no flashlights, and worse, no candy. In front of the house, even the grown-ups said it was haunted. Toby thought we should go in and ask her for help, or at least some candy, so the night wouldn't be a total loss. I thought we should run before she does something horrible to us. And I hope he was right. Ellie then got to the front door and knocked. We waited there for long minutes, listening to the creak of the wind in the trees and the tap-tap of the skulls knocking against each other. Miss McKay had been predictably weird in her choice of Halloween decoration. Sure, Miss Whittle had her skulls in her trees too, but she had other things. Giant spiders, plastic gravestones, and cheery construction vampire beside her door. Miss McKay had none of that. She only had the skulls, hanging from the skinny, gnarled trees that could almost be considered Halloween decorations themselves. And there we must have had hundreds of them, suspended from the little clusters like weird fruit. Each of them had a flickering candle inside that one would shine out through the eye sockets like a morbid jack-o'-lantern. They lit up almost the entirety of the yard by themselves, and I wondered suddenly on how much it cost to buy all that many of them. Ellie turned to us, still opened on the door. I don't think she's home. But there's lights in their windows. Yeah, but she's not coming to the door. I say we leave and don't... What was that? Toby and I jump in illusion. What was what? Something moved inside. Don't be dumb. That just means she's home. No! It wasn't like a footstep movement. It was like a bump. Like someone falling. How do you hear it now? No. Toby was backing away from the house. Rue, I changed my mind. Let's get out of here. No, I said, suddenly angry. We're not going to let this whole evening be in a waste. It's Halloween night. If you're going to be a grown-up and kids knock on your door on Halloween night, you have to answer and you have to give them candy. That's how it works. I stormed up to the porch, Ellie stepping aside as I pounded on the door. Miss McKay, we know you're in there. Come out and give. Suddenly, I stopped, my eyes going wide. Rue, you okay? I started backing away from the door, staring at it, pulling Ellie with me. She's right there. What do you... I heard her. Toby, right there. On the other side of the door, she scratched on it, and then she sounded, Rue, come on, let's go. I was almost in tears as Ellie pulled me back down to the drive. She sounded like her breath was on fire. We made our way slowly down to the drive and to the sidewalk, right where the light from the skulls puddled and died. You okay, Ruby? Toby asked, looking nervously at me as we sat shakishly here in the concrete. Yeah, I wiped my eyes and stood. Yeah, come on, let's go home. Yeah, Ellie said, standing down the street, the Florence in her step masking the fact that her knees were still shaking. Ellie, Toby said, staring after her. What? He pointed as we realized he already had. The houses were dark. The streetlights were dead. The sky was cloudy and the moon had set. Even if we had known how to get back home, we could see nothing beyond Miss McKay's picket fence. I still felt the shakes coming on again, and managed to stand before they could even take me over and crumble me to the ground again. We'll take her lanterns. What, the creepy skulls? Toby said, looking away as they swayed and flickered on their coarse twine. Won't we, get in trouble? She wouldn't give us candy. She wouldn't let us call our parents. At least she can do is give us some light, and besides, she's got so many, she'll never notice if we take a couple. Toby opened his mouth and closed it again. I don't know. Isn't stealing wrong? Ruby's right, Ellie said, scrambling up to the peeling fence. We're not stealing, we're returning the favor. She handed down 3 of them, 1 to each of us, though enough twine that would give us enough to hold them with both our hands throughout the whole way home. The twine was rough and left splinters in your hands, but it was better than holding the skulls themselves. Those were made some kind of delicate plastic, both soft and hard at the same time, with rough patches here and along it. I had never held such natural bone before, but it felt disturbingly like how I imagined it would feel. But what they lit the way at least, and the little bobbing circles of orange like miniature headlights. We picked our way nervously around the route, and though Billy's friends had chased us in, jumping occasionally as stray cats or looming shadows that moved suddenly at the edges of our vision. But we back looked different when we didn't see we were being chased, and doing it we didn't take any more than a few minutes to lose ourselves among the confused tangled alleyways. No, I swear I remember that Santa, Toby was saying, staring at the huge decayed inflatable that the garbage man hadn't bothered to pick up since last Christmas. Really? Because I don't, Ellie said, picking up the tattered box of latex that had fallen off and staring down at the alleyway. And besides, do you remember seeing it, or do you remember passing it? I think I remember passing it. I don't know. He looked down on the other alley, and then worriedly back at the one way they had came from. Rue, do you remember this thing? Huh? I said, my attention snapping away from the jack-o'-lantern, grinning improbably from the roof of the building before us. I don't think so, but it's not like I was paying any attention. Okay. He kept looking up, seemingly mesmerized by the way the light was from the skull that played across its hollowed-out form. Well, I'm going this way. You guys can go the other way if you want. No, I'll come with you, I said, watching Ellie peer down the path and then the other. I have no idea where we are. You guys do that then. She then turned and started walking from the other way from Santa. And when it's a dead end, you'll all be really sad that I beat you home. Fine, Toby said, as he started walking past the other direction, and I followed him. The skull held up to my chest like a shield. It wasn't a dead end. We had gone to the place we almost recognized, the back of the Pink Elephant Bar and Grill, which Toby at least thought might be near the mall, when we heard Ellie scream. Between the panic and the flickering light, it took us almost 5 minutes to find our way back to Santa. The alley she had gone down split again into a twisting maze, but none of the paths held the actual exit. All of them had stopped some kind of garbage can, blocked fence, or wall, and although searched and called through them, Ellie was gone. It was only when we trudged back past Santa, and then I noticed the jack-o'-lantern was gone too. Toby and I were both shaking uncontrollably, trying and failing to stem the tears leaking from our eyes. Where she had gone, she couldn't have come back past us. Could have she gotten over one of the walls? Then why didn't she answer when we called? Toby said. Through my fear and his, I could barely understand him. Rue, what do we do? I don't know. She's gone, Rue! He collapsed onto the ground between piles of trash. She's gone. Something's out there and it got her. And it's going to get us. We've got to get home. Mom and Dad will know what to do. I started walking again, my knees almost literally knocking when I heard Toby get up and follow me. It can't be that far now. The pink elephant, as it turned out, it was not by the mall. It was on a street we didn't recognize, despite the fact that we both had driven past it more times than we could have counted. Lights glowed on the bottoms of the clouds in the distance, but the street lights were worked no better than they had in front of Miss McKay's house. The houses were still a bit dark, and our lights flowed over forgotten Halloween decorations and bits of shrubbery we walked. Neither of us remember running anywhere through there and what looked like this, but we were beginning to realize just how poor our memories might have been. "Hey, Rue," Toby said, pausing and shining his light to one of the house's dark doors. "Yeah? We should ask one of them for help. They won't be mean as Miss McKay." I looked at the door and saw the tiny scarecrow hunched over on the chair in the porch, and the black windows around it almost seemed angrily to reflect the light back at us. What if they are? What do you mean? Who knows? It's late at night, probably early by now. Everyone's asleep. Can you imagine how much trouble we'll be in if we show up at the door like this and want them to help us? He stared at the door for a moment longer and then slowly nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. Come on, it can't be not much farther now." On and on we walked until we began wandering idly, and then more seriously, why hadn't it become morning yet? Sometimes one of us thought we recognized the building, but we didn't know the town well enough to investigate them, and there were still no cars that still had no lights, and we began to wonder if the power had gone out. And when we turned a corner, there was at least something besides the skulls glowing in the dark. "Oh, thank goodness," Toby said, taking off running towards it. "They must be still awake if they still got their jack-o'-lanterns out." "Toby!" I shouted, catching up to him. "Toby, wait! It was there when—" The jack-o'-lantern stood. I couldn't see it very well in the dark. It was tall and robed and stared down at Toby with a hungry passion, with its glowing face hanging in there like the darkness, like it was a ghost. It's burned into my mind. Its triangle eyes, face downwards, giving it almost a sad expression that seemed like odds with the other features. Its teeth were squared and blocky, bared in the carnivore smile of a deep fish sea. Its nose was upside down, heart, looking as if the third eye was lit up by Toby's screaming face, and then from a deep within itself, it reached an arm. I turned and ran. The light from my skull danced and jumped along the sidewalk in front of me, punctuating each little jolt that my running feet sent through the body with the flicker of the light. Then it was gone, drowned out by a sudden bright flash from behind me. The sound of Toby's footsteps stopped as his screams reached to a fever pitch. There was a whoosh and a roar, drowning out my own screams as I careened along the pavement. And then the screams were gone as well. The light from behind me faded and died. I wish I looked back. Perhaps he wasn't gone. Perhaps he was still standing there like before, terrified into silence. I could have gone back, could have helped him, but I didn't. I ran and kept running until quite literally collapsed from exhaustion. Then I curled up there, against the fence of a house. I didn't know sobs of guilt and fear and so sadness racking through my body until they were all I could feel. That was where the police found me. They said a lot of things to me as they put blankets around my shoulders, gave me mugs of some of their hot drink. They told me that I was all right and that I could relax now, that it was over. They told me our parents were terrified that we have been gone for hours and that they have been trying to find us and couldn't anywhere. They asked me where Toby and Ellie were, and I couldn't tell them. They seemed to understand, though, as we drove through some of the streets that seemed to be so well lit out. They told me it was okay and that they would take me home. They said me more, but I wasn't listening. I started to nod off, but the waves of relief washed over my body and left one of the officers to take my mug from my hands before I spilt it. And then I saw it sitting there in the middle of the road, right on the path of the car. The jack-o'-lantern. I don't even remember what happened next very well. I remember the feeling in my stomach as the car swerved and the driver swearing as he carnaged into the ditch. I remember shouts and screams as that thing outside rose to its full height. Although I don't remember wherever it came from, me or the policemen. I remember the copper stink of blood billowing through the car as the crimson waves of the seats were crumpled together and the windows were shattered as one. I remember the instant, the tiniest second of silence. I hung there in my seatbelt, the forgotten blanket dangling like wings around me. Shards of glass falling like silver leaves from the window above, and my lungs forgetting for a moment how to breathe. I then pulled myself free, crawled up through the wreckage to stare at the monster standing on the road, wrapped the blanket around myself as I stood atop of the ruined car, and those orange eyes met mine. "What are you?" I screamed, backing away as I stepped forward. It slipping and falling down the side of the car, landing hard on the blood-splattered sidewalk. "What do you want?" It did not reply. It just cocked its head, reaching out that long, impossible, many-jointed arm. I stared at it for seconds, breath-ragged, shakes crawling up and down my body like spiders. Before I realized it, it wasn't reaching for me. It was holding out its hand for something. "The skull," I said, slowly holding myself to the feet. "You're here for the skull." It didn't move. "Fine," I shouted, tears breaking from my eyelids. "Take it. Just please, leave me alone, please." I reached down for it, meaning to throw that horrible thing, and stopped. The skull was gone. Where could it have gone? I scrambled to the wreck, started to crawl back up the ruined siren lights. Had I had it in the car? Had I left it where I'd fallen? Had I dropped it when the creature took Toby? I started desperately pawing through the remains of the headless gore and long cuts as they were leaving on my arm. It had to be there. It had to. It had to. I felt something on my back, something rough and long and misshapen. The hands closed around me, fingers snapping the joint by joint around my torso as it hauled me into the air. I screamed and screamed, pawing at the car, but it had already lifted me to face it, making that strange motion of the combination of a shudder and a shrug, and the slightest sound of rustling fabric. It opened its cloak. I had expected a body inside, legs at least. It had walked towards me, had stepped down from the garden wall. I had expected something to hold up that pumpkin head, to attach the horrible arm that ached between us. But there was nothing inside. It was just a hollow, empty cloak, waiting there just like a vast, open mouth, and the only thing inside that robe, lining the insides, and after row after the endless, impossible row, there were candles. For a moment those candles lit me as I hung from the frozen and staring from its grasp. Then the hand was gone, and the robe had closed around me, and there was nothing but pale white fire. And now I am nothing. My hands are coarse and twined, holding my dear life onto the branch that holds me. My eyes are golden light, staring out from my empty sockets, as crossing the things which I can no longer understand. My mind is the flicker, flicker, flicker of the candle in my skull, burning with each thought into it, that I may know how those things may have forgotten. I have forgotten who I am. I have forgotten why I'm here. I have forgotten why these events had to come to me. I will remember one thing. The knowledge is that when the night ends, the lantern witch will come to me. She'll blow me out in an easy, single, swift motion, and I will die.